Well, people got to slow down those repetitions. This idea of going fast to be fast, that's a lot of nonsense. There's never been any real research to prove that. This whole penchant for using Olympic lifts to make you more explosive. You know what it makes you more explosive for? Doing Olympic lifts. There's very little carryover value into
Right.
other activities. Your body is so specific. And this idea that you need to be explosive, it's what causes an awful lot of joint wear and tear and injuries. I'm a real fan, real advocate of slow speed repetitions.
Interesting.
Certainly nothing much faster than 2 seconds to lift the weight and 4 seconds to lower, and paying a lot of attention to that negative. And I'll tell you, there's a lot of guys over 40 that are finding that they absolutely have to lift that way or they're just going to tear themselves to pieces. And I've even experimented with really, really slow speed repetitions, and I like it. And you know something interesting? When I was in Russia, a lot of the Russian special ops guys and Spetsnaz guys in like Russian martial arts, like Sistema, they really like the slow speed repetitions also. I
That's
thought that
interesting.
was kind of fascinating.
So that just takes your risk for getting injured and just drops it through the floor because you're slow, you're concentrated, you're focusing on movement quality and not just ripping through the reps and sets, right?
Right, just yanking your joints and using excessive force and so forth. Now, I mean, for sure, you can hurt yourself doing anything.
Sure.
But it's all about just maintaining really, really good form and realizing that the true purpose of exercise is not to see how much weight can go up and down or how many repetitions you can do, but to create muscular fatigue, a rapid muscular fatigue. It's called inroading, make the muscle as tired as possible, as quickly as possible. And that's the goal because that's what's going to set my biology in action. I actually tap into my own survival mechanism. That's going to create the stress that indicates to my body, to my system, that hey, I can't handle the task that was asking me, so I better get a little bit stronger.
Yeah.
And that's the true purpose of exercise. And it doesn't take huge weights, and you certainly don't need to throw the weights around and use a lot of excessive momentum and so forth. And I mean, for sure, there's guys that have gotten good results doing almost anything. You
Right.
know, powerlifting works, Olympic lifting works, CrossFit works. I mean, you'll find examples of people that have been successful at almost anything. But some things work better for most people most of the time in a much safer manner with a lot less potential of injuries.
Well, it's so funny, Steve, because I got started in this game about 12 years ago is when I really got serious, starting to learn more about things and training people and so on and so forth. And I started out with general old school bodybuilding tactics, and then I went to bodyweight stuff, and then I learned kettlebell stuff, and then I learned Indian club stuff and CrossFit and old time strongman and all this crazy stuff. And then you know what's happened? Over the years, I've gotten so banged up and bruised up from doing all this crazy stuff that right now, what do? I go back to the gym and I just do some simple old school bodybuilding stuff again. It's almost like it's come full circle because I know that the risk of me getting injured when I do a nice controlled set of back squats is significantly less than if I'm doing explosive alternating pistols during a wind-sucking workout. You know what I mean?
Well, that's the other thing too. People think if they're not just beating their brains out, that somehow they didn't get a really decent workout,
Right.
and they're looking for this kind of some type of sensuous experience. Something that's really stimulating to the senses and becoming over adrenalized and just smashing themselves, thinking that unless they do this, it's just not a decent workout. But that's just simply nonsense. You don't have to do that to yourself. I mean, for sure, you got to work hard in order to get results, but you don't need to just crush yourself and you hear the people screaming and moaning and making all sorts of noises and putting on a show. And like look at me. I'm a little attention whore. Look how
Yeah.
hard I'm working. Yeah,
Raw!
yeah, exactly. Like the Incredible Hulk kind of thing. But I'm like you. I've kind of come full circle back to my roots. Um, Pretty much just doing pretty much standard, pull ups, chin ups, dips, push ups, pistol squats, sometimes real slow body weight squats, various abdominal exercises and back extensions. And, I always like to work the ancillary movements for my wrist, fingers, hands, neck, calves, feet, that type of thing. You can't forget those little ancillary muscle group things.
Right.
And most of the workouts are pretty brief. If my workouts last much longer than my strength workouts, 20 minutes is a long workout.
Oh wow. Wow,
So
really brief and very
less
specific.
is more.
Do you
Very
do
low rest between sets.
a couple days a week, 3 days a week, something like that?
Yeah, like twice a week for the strength stuff.
Yeah.
I like to do some form of high intensity. I hate to use the word cardio because it's really muscle endurance,
We'll go
but some form of
conditioning.
yeah, some type of conditioning work. I'm a real fan of some of the work that like Tim Anderson and his vestibular reset stuff.
Hmm.
I have been doing crawls since the '60s when as a young wrestler, and all through college we used to use various crawl patterning for wrestling conditioning, and I continued through with my in jiu-jitsu. I love crawling, and the more I read about Spider-Man crawls and so forth, I kind of went full circle with that. So I love that type of locomotion type of conditioning also.
Absolutely. It's
And you can crawl if you can do a Spider-Man crawl for like 10 minutes. Wow, you're pretty damn good shape.
Yeah, it's amazing how much that connects you contralaterally, right? Because so many people have these issues from sitting all day in funky positions and they don't strengthen their patterns across their body. And when you start doing things like crawling and crab walking and rolling and so on and so forth, how much that really benefits you as a whole person when it comes to making your movement better. So,
Yeah, they call it the X. Opposite shoulder, opposite hip.
yeah,
That cross pattern, and that cross crawl. Opposite limb movement, right arm, left leg, so forth. So, I like to think of sitting in a chair as the new smoking,
right, right.
because I mean that's just how harmful it really is.
And yet
The
here I am.
sedentary life, and me too. I try to sit on the floor a lot more.
Yeah,
But getting up and moving in a cross crawl pattern because it is shocking how you literally forget how to move. I mean, I see it all the time in my workshops and things. Even with some pretty strong guys, they don't move well. Horrible movement patterns, and it just really pains me to see kids that already have lost basic movement patterning, and they go to these training gyms and coaches are loading bad movement patterns.
yeah.
It's like, what, are you crazy? Get the kids moving right. Get people going through, getting their proper range of motion, and let's get the posture fixed a little bit by getting them rolling around on the floor and reclaiming some of the lost movements. Then think about maybe loading it up. But a lot of these people can't even use their body weight to do stuff, so they certainly have no business trying to move weights around.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Steve. I've had a lot of movement guys on the show. Erwan Lacour, Ido Portal, people like that, and I'm just so fascinated by movement. Not so much because it's an interesting topic, but because there's just not that many people who can spot good or bad movement. How would you recommend to somebody else to know whether or not their coach actually understands movement? I know that's a tough question to answer.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because a lot of people do find it boring,
Yeah.
but it shouldn't be. Um, I usually have just my own little simple screens. I mean, there's these real complex movement screening and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, I can pretty much just watch a person get up and down off the floor,
Right.
do a simple squat, do a simple push up. If they're capable of actually pulling their own weight up, I can tell you tons just from observing those basic type movements. And it's shocking to me how many people don't have these. Don't have good movements. I mean, just this simple movement that I just talked about.
Yeah.
All sorts of stuff like claps back, claps head, internally rotated arms, claps mid back. Can't squat much below parallel without either going up in their toes or they just simply can't get down without excessive forward lean. Sometimes I'll stand people up against the wall and try to look at their alignment and just awful. Forward head, kyphosis, internally rotated arms. A lot of it's from sitting. A lot of it's from improper training. Some of it's overuse from certain types of sports. Really
Too much chest
cause.
and biceps.
Yeah, well, but I mean, I'm thinking like, well, the one that jumps out at me is cycling. Bicyclists.
Sure.
They have that forward head kyphosis. Triathletes, jiu-jitsu guys actually have pretty horrible posture because they play guard all the time. They get really strong through their hip flexors and their abdominals, and they're internally rotated. So, they walk around looking like gorillas sometimes.
Yeah, they're looking like
And
apes with the shoulders forward and they're
exactly.
ready to take
And
you
it's not
down.
an attractive. I've seen some pictures of myself, on the internet. It's like, whoa, not so attractive because I'm kind of an iPad jockey myself now. I have a lot of online personal training clients, and it takes quite a bit of time sitting at my iPad every day, tapping out answers to questions and so forth. So, I have been known to have to do some stints, but what I tried to do is lay on my stomach on the floor.
Yeah.
It's called the Sphinx posture. It kind of opens my chest and my back, and then I try to sit cross-legged. I try to sit in all what's referred to as the archetypal human postures, like little kids, right? Because one of the major differences between old and young is your comfort on the floor. Most adults in the United States, especially, but most Western developed countries, are incredibly uncomfortable on the floor. They can't sit for long without fidgeting and moving, and they're just in agony because their bodies are so stiff and tight. So by getting off the chair and getting on the floor, it's really, really good for the posture, and it makes you supple. It was a very interesting study done at a major university. I think it was Sao Paulo University. Brazilians do some kind of interesting stuff. And they did a lifestyle questionnaire and a risk assessment. And they were able to predict the percent chance a person had of dying within the next 10 years or whatever from all causes. I mean, they looked at everything from diet to, genetics to, health habits, driving, risky behaviors, everything, man. And then they correlated that with your ability to get up and down off the floor without points of support. And the people that needed, the more points of support the person needed, the greater their chance of dying from all causes, premature death. I thought that was fascinating. They were able to correlate lifestyle risk with your ability to get up and down off the floor comfortably. And if you think about it, I mean, I don't know what kind of condition your parents are in, if they're still alive, but I know for a fact that my mom probably could not get up and down off the floor.
Yeah.
I don't think she could. It would be great difficulty for her to do it. And I mean, I've had clients that were like 20, 30 years younger than my mother that had trouble getting up and down off the floor.
Sure.
So, I mean, it definitely tells you a lot about your movement capability, and it's more than just not being able to move. It has an awful lot to do with your percent chance of premature death, because once you stop moving, man, everything just goes to hell.
Man, it's all about movement. I flashed back to a client I had a few years ago when I first got with her. One of my tests before starting something like a Turkish get-up is just, hey, roll over from your back to your stomach without pressing your elbows or your legs into the ground. And it's amazing how many people, and even relatively fit-looking people, you'll put on their backs and they have no coordination of their trunk. They cannot coordinate the use of their hips all the way up to their neck. It's crazy, and it's just wild how many people don't know that. Hey, most people don't know. You're probably the reason why people are all out there doing Turkish get-ups. Is that right?